The monastery in which I lived for 12 years in Vermont was named the Charter House of the Transfiguration. So today's mystery is very close to me. It's one that came actually only fairly late as a feast into the Western Church, around the year 1000, which is late. A feast of light, which is the Eastern Church specializes in that. And we see that clearly in what happened to Jesus in prayer. His face became dazzling white, as did his clothes. And the opening prayer for the feast reminds us that not only do we see Jesus' glory, but this prefigures and foreshadows our own glory as adopted children of God. We share in his glory. We are called, as Paul said to the Corinthians, to gaze on the Lord with unveiled face and to be transformed from glory to glory, from one degree of glory to another, even by the Lord who is the Spirit. And indeed the whole universe, when we have eyes to see, is aflame with God's glory. The inner radiance of everything comes through to us, the whole creation. So it is a feast of light. The feast takes place on August 6th, which is a mystical 7 months to the day after the Feast of the Epiphany, January 6th, which precisely is a feast of light, the manifestation of God's light as he comes into the world. Fine. So why do we have it today? Why do we have the Transfiguration today, traditionally on the second Sunday of Lent? It's not just because, according to one tradition, the Transfiguration took place 40 days before the Passion on Good Friday. There's a deeper intrinsic connection here with darkness. Now, have you ever wondered what time of day the Transfiguration took place? And most people imagine it took place during the day. Paintings of the Transfiguration through the centuries show it in daytime. But suppose it was at night, in the dark. Going up on the mountain to pray in the dark. Imagine how dazzling it would have been then, even more so. And there's even an indication here in Luke's version, which we just read, which points out that the disciples were heavy with sleep, overcome with sleep, literally weighed down with sleep. Now you know very well you can get drowsy during the day. But very possibly, they were sleepy because it was night. But then it said they woke up and saw his glory, which of course has a mystical meaning too. You got to wake up. It's what the Buddhists always say, right? You have to wake up, become awakened to see the radiance of things as they are. The title Buddha, as you may know, actually means the one who woke up, the awakened one. But our tradition too. Paul to the Ephesians has this wonderful phrase, probably from an early hymn, that says, "Awake, O sleeper! Rise from the dead. Christ will give you light." And the parables of the virgins awaiting the coming of the bridegroom. And when does he come? Midnight. Special intimacy coming in the dark, or as the bride as the lover in the Song of Songs says, he knocks on the door and says, "My locks are dripping with the dew of the night." And the monks of course rise in the middle of the night to pray. There's a special intimacy when everything else is quiet, to meet God in the night. So let's meditate a little bit on the different types of night or darkness that might apply to our journey. Now, on one level, the darkness is our inner darkness in the sense of the negative resistance to the light. All the stuff in us that resists the light, that refuses to come to the light, as St. John says, or as the list of things in the second reading today. All that inner darkness. When John of the Cross, the mystic, speaks about the dark night of the soul, that's the first level of meaning that he's talking about. All that we see our sinfulness more clearly as we journey towards God. We become more aware of our resistance. It's what St. John means in the prologue to his gospel when he says, "The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." But that's just the very first level of darkness. You know, our sins, the greed, hatred, and ignorance that the Buddhists speak of. There's another level, which is actually more positive. It's when we seek to go dark, when we allow all our previous views and opinions and insights and feelings even to fall away. All the noise of our own minds, even the good thoughts that we think we have that kind of encapsulate God or our vision of the universe or of ourselves. The closer we get to God, the further we get. We've got to let that go. It's completely inadequate to the mystery of God and even to our own mystery. That's why deeper forms of prayer seek silence. Because only silence is adequate to the majesty of God. That's the kind of darkness that St. John of the Cross again speaks of in his poem when he says, "I set out at night with my house now at rest." Well, what he means is his house is his body and mind and spirit. They're at rest. They're dark. They put out their own lights so that God's light can be seen. How can we see the stars? When we have our own light on, as we know in the city. When do you see the lights? The stars, with all the lights. And by the way, did you notice that night in the first reading? Again, God visits Abraham and he says, "Go out and look at the stars. As many as the stars of the sky, so will your descendants be." So it had to be night for Abraham to see the mystery, to see the stars. So that's another level of darkness which is positive, challenging, because we'd like to hold on, to our own view of things. We think we're giving up everything if we give up our own opinion. But that's what we need to do. Enter into that dark. Okay, now there's a third level, which in a sense is even more challenging. It's the level of trials and difficulties and sufferings. The darkness that we have to struggle with in that sense. Death eventually. And that's the level that we're talking about in the Exodus. Did you notice? As Jesus was there with Moses and Elijah, the law and the prophets, it says they spoke to him about the Exodus he was going to accomplish in Jerusalem. And that's that Passover. That's that passage through death, through the agony, when Jesus prayed in the night on the Mount of Olives, night in so many senses to be delivered. He had to pass through that death, pass through that trial, enter into that darkness in order to come to the light, pass through that death to enter into life. And so do we. There's no other way. Abraham too, his vision here in this first reading, it says a terrible fearsome darkness came upon him. And he saw the transfer, the journey of his successors, his offspring, as many as the stars of the sky, into the promised land. And for some reason they left out a couple of verses which said he saw his successors, his descendants, in slavery in Egypt. So he saw the whole journey having to pass through from slavery, from our previous self, our own ideas and sin, through death, through darkness, to new life. So that's an inevitable way that we need to go, to pass through the trials and difficulties of our lives and abandoning ourselves to God's love, entering by faith into the darkness, into the abyss. That's the passage of our lives, always in and with Christ. But you know, there's an even deeper sense of darkness that again we have to enter into. It's the darkness of God. God's darkness. One of the mystics speaks about a ray of divine darkness. Paradox. Why? Because God's light is darkness to us. Our eyes have to get used to it. God's light is infinite. God's light is darkness to us. That's why, again, to go back to Moses in the wilderness, one of the great mystics, Gregory of Nyssa, speaks about Moses going up the mountain, just like the disciples do in the Gospel, up Mount Sinai, through the cloud, which covers over, our previous ways of knowing and thinking. But then beyond that, he says, and this is the word that appears in the book of Exodus, in the scriptures, he entered into the darkness where God was. We have to be prepared for that. We see it in the gospel as well, do we not? The cloud overshadowed them. And they were afraid when they entered the cloud, of course. But it was only there that they saw not just the glory of God, but they heard the voice saying, "This is my beloved Son, listen to him." A further revelation which could only take place in the dark. Or again, going back to Abraham, it says, before it says this fearsome darkness came over him, it says he entered a trance. That's the translation here. It's a word in Hebrew, tardema, which only occurs twice in Scripture. Once here, and the other time, Adam in the garden. He entered into a deep sleep, a trance, as Eve was being created from his rib. So he entered into this divine darkness and discovered the mystery of the universe, masculine and feminine. So the further you go, the more there's need to enter into the dark, to accustom yourself to the dark. And God is darkness above all, not just because he's infinite light, so far beyond our mere reflection and image, created nothing that we are, but also because of who God is and what that light is, how it functions. God's light is not just shining like out there. It's energy. It's pouring itself out. It's dynamically emptying itself constantly. That's the whole mystery of the Trinity. The Father is light and life and love precisely by pouring himself out. That's what God is. And the Son receives him, and in the Spirit throws it right back to the Father. A torrent of love pouring out. John of the Cross speaks of that at the end of the spiritual life, this sharing in this dynamic life of the Trinity. That's what's so dark for us, because we can't imagine what it's like to participate in that. To discover that degree, intensity of life, that modality of being alive. And you see how that assumes or subsumes and includes all the other types of darkness that I've been talking about. When we encounter that type of light and life, we know how miserable and sinful we are, that first level. We see it more clearly, and we know we have to get free from it. We know the second level, that we have to stop knowing and get rid of our previous ways of understanding and feeling, totally inadequate to the mystery of true life and true life. And third, we are able then to let go even more. We're trained to let go and trust and throw ourselves into the abyss of our physical death and our sufferings and our persecutions and every other death we need to die to reach this level. I die every day, Paul says. And he says, you have already died. Your life is hidden now with Christ in God. When Christ, who is our life, appears, then will you appear with him in glory. Or as Jesus himself says very simply, if you would save your life, you'll lose it. It's only when you lose your life, throw it into the abyss of God, that you'll understand what life really is. That throwing of life into the abyss, which is the Trinity, which is the passion and resurrection, which is our true destiny, made in God's image and likeness. That's who we truly are. So we finally realize that that darkness is light. That dying is life. It transforms everything, transfigures everything. Even as St. Paul says, this lowly body of ours to be conformed to his glorious body. So let's focus, if I can say that, on this mystery. Focus our whole life on it. Or to use the phrase from the second letter of Peter in the New Testament, referring explicitly to the Transfiguration event, it says, you would do well to keep your attention fixed on this, like a lamp shining in a dark place, until the day arises and the morning star rises in your heart.